Welcome to Clued In Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. What about you?
I'm great, and I can't believe we have such a treat. We have an amazing interview today. So I'm going to introduce, through his bio, Mike Ripley. Mike Ripley was born a long time ago in a galaxy far away, Yorkshire. He read economic history at university and then trained as a journalist before moving into public relations, becoming director of press and PR for the Brewers Society, promoting British beers and pubs. The obligatory midlife crisis led to him becoming an archaeologist, mostly on Roman and Anglo-Saxon sites. A published author of crime fiction since 1988, he has twice won the Crime Writers' Last Laugh Award, a Sherlock Award, the Angel Award for Fiction, and the H.R.F. Keating Award for Fiction for his history of British thrillers. As a critic for more than 30 years, he has reviewed over 2,000 mysteries for various newspapers, written for radio, and was a scriptwriter on the BBC show Lovejoy. Welcome, Mike. This is just such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Delighted to be here.
So one of the reasons we invited you is because you have been continuing some of the work that Margery Allingham did with her sleuth, Albert Campion. And in past episodes, we have discussed when one author continues another author's work. Can you share a little bit about how you came to write Mr. Campion's Farewell?
Well, the first thing to say is I was a fan long before I started writing them. And I think I first discovered Margery Allingham in the mid-1960s, actually around about the time she died. And so I never got to meet her or anything, but the books made a real impression on me because unlike other Golden Age mysteries, as we say, the famous detectives like Hercule Poirot and Lord Peter Wimsey and so on, her hero, Albert Campion, had two great qualities, I thought. One, he was quite funny, and two, he didn't age. Now, Hercule Poirot didn't age because he was timeless. He was retired when he started in 1920, and he was about 127 when he finished his career. But it didn't matter because the books are, as Agatha Christie wrote them, absolutely timeless classics. Lord Peter Wimsey got to a certain age when that terrible thing called marriage happens and was more or less retired that way. But Albert Campion got married and continued over a long period of 30-odd years, having adventures. And brilliantly, he aged. He got older. If you look at the books written in the late 50s and early 60s, there are some terrific writings, terrific descriptions of him having a fight scene, which all heroes are supposed to have. But he's noticeably older and he's thinking all the time, oh my God, I'm far too old for this. I can't do this anymore. I can't shoot guns, I can't run away, and so on. And that intrigued me, that he was so human in that way. So I was a great fan. And purely by chance, I ended up living only about 10 miles from Margery Allingham's home. And indeed, my neighbour in the village I live in is the niece of the last housekeeper of Margery Allingham. So we're all quite a bit like the Salem witch trials around here. I'm not kidding about that. And so there are lots of little connections. Plus, my first job in this region after I left university was actually I worked at Essex University, which now houses the Margery Allingham archive. So a lot of stars combined, if you like to think of it that way. But basically, I was a fan to begin with. Well, I'd written a few novels, comic novels, and a couple of historical ones. And because of my various connections with Allingham country, as it were, I was asked to speak at a Margery Allingham convention. There's a small society called Margery Allingham Society, and it was holding its convention in a hotel just down the road. So I thought, why not? So I went and told the story about how I discovered Margery books and how I liked them. and everybody was very polite and applauded and so on. And when we sort of broke for lunch, one of the members of the society said quite casually that there was a third Campion book started by her husband. Now, when Margery died, her husband, who was called Youngman Carter, completed the book she'd been writing, which was called Cargo of Eagles, and then wrote two more. And they were called Mr. Campion's Farthing and Mr. Campion's Falcon. He then started, which I'd read and I knew about, but I didn't know he'd started a third, and then he'd died. And the society had been left in the will of Margery's sister, the manuscript. So it was theirs to do with what they wanted. And they'd had it for 20 years. And one or two people had looked at it. They'd asked a couple of crime writers whether they considered trying to finish it, and nobody had seemed too keen. And it must have been a very good lunch because I was, quite keen to volunteer. Then I was told that there was no synopsis, there was no plot structure, there was nothing, just 3.5 chapters of first draft manuscript. And I thought, well, I like a challenge. So I took a look at it and then said, yeah, I can do this, I can finish it. Because that was the advantage of me, because I'm living around here. I recognised most of the places that Youngman Carter was talking about, and a very important clue in the names he gave to one of the places and things. And so I made up a plot and thought, well, as he'd started it in 1969 and was writing it as if it was contemporary, you'd have Campion was now 69 years old, because he's as old as the century. And so we have an elderly man, maybe coming up to retirement, or at least thinking of retiring from this detective business. Not as quick as he was, not sharp as he was maybe, and he's coming up against crimes that were predominant in the 60s. So we're talking about drug smuggling, perhaps, and naughty substances. And so I put together the book that way, and that was him reacting. And we called it Mr. Campion's Farewell, because it was a farewell to detecting rather than anything else. And unfortunately, the publishers liked it and said, can you do another one? And now I've just delivered number 12. So, and for a man who's in his 60s going on 70s, an awful lot of adventures have been packed in between 1969 and 1972. That's all I'm saying. So eventually he will get a quiet retirement, I hope, because he certainly deserves one.
Well, I've read a couple of the books that you've written, and his son features in the two that I've written. I don't know if that's true of the other ones. So are you kind of setting the stage for his son to perhaps take over some responsibilities?
No, no, I'm not, because Margery Allingham didn't. The son, Rupert, is mentioned in a couple of Allingham books. I mean, one when he's born and one when he's a young boy. But actually, she herself didn't really seem to see the idea of a family takeover. The nearest she came was she mentioned in 1958 in an essay she wrote, which was called What to Do with an Aging Detective. And she suggested that perhaps not, she didn't mention Rupert at all, but she did put out the sort of suggestion that her nephew, who was called Christopher, might be a suitable candidate to take on the business. Now, Christopher is very rarely referred to in the bulk of the books, but one of the great characters that she invented, who is the manservant called Lug, and Lug's opinion of Christopher is just that, he was the son of your brother who got dropped on his head while at Eden, and that's all you get to know about it. So when I've in the last published book, I've actually given Christopher a decent role, as much as you can for somebody who's the son of somebody who got dropped on the head at Eden. And he's in public relations, which of course He gets his clients into more scrapes than he gets them out of, but he has to go to Albert for help. And and that's my sort of little homage. I kept Rupert in and even given Rupert a wife, but there was no indication that he would take on the family business. And I don't think I I could do it because the family is Albert Campion, Lug, the manservant, and Lady Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
Those three are the core. I think anything else would be watering it down somewhat. Not It's not up to me. Maybe somebody else, but not me.
Well, Mike, you explained a little bit about how you were a fan before starting to write. And so, how was researching these books different from writing your other novels?
Well, for the series I'm best known for, which is the Angel series of comedy crimes, no research was required at all. And somebody once said, "Where do you come up with your ideas?" I said, "I just hang around in pubs," because at the time that was my job. And and it was simply, once I'd formulated the character, it was just a question of look at the newspaper and say, "Aha, um, fox hunting, that's an issue. What would Angel do?" And away you went. And you have a lot of jokes lined up. And once you've told them all on post-it notes, and as you tell them, you take them down. And when you've got no jokes left out, you think, I'd better make, a lot of shots rang out and they all fell dead. So they were quite easy. They were fun to write. The difference with the Campion ones is the research was partly because they're all set in the late 60s and 70s. Now, I do have a rule, especially when I was reviewing books, that, you have the expression historical mysteries. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, any book that's set in a period when I was alive ain't history as far as I'm concerned. So it was just a question of remembering a lot. And of course, you have the marvellous canon of 20-odd Margery Allingham books, novels, not to mention loads of short stories to fall back on. So that I sort of knew the period I was working in. Now, when I've done, as I have on a few occasions, I've done flashbacks to the 1930s or to the Second World War, then I have had to do some serious research. But that's part and parcel of the job, and that's actually the fun part of the job often. Just actually having to write the damn thing is really boring. But it's digging up what you can. I mean, one little example, I was curious, Lady Amanda, Campion's wife, is an aeronautical engineer. Now, when she becomes an aeronautical engineer in the 1930s, it seems from the books that she just does it. She doesn't go to university. She's not trained in anything. She likes tinkering with engines and she has a flair, but it's sort of glossed over. And you think, and in fact, I've had a character say this in one of the books, is, that is a really strange occupation for a lady, isn't it? Which isn't now, but was then, until I was doing some research into aircraft designs, and I discovered that there's an amazing woman called Blossom Miles, whose career is exactly what Lady Amanda's was, apart from the fact that she wasn't married to a detective. And obviously, Margery Allingham knew of this woman. She was quite famous in her day, but she was a pilot. She went on to design aircraft and actually designed aircraft during the war, and had her own company with her husband. So there was a possibility. That sort of research I found was fascinating. It's great stuff, and it didn't mean anything much in the book, except it gave me the confidence to go to say, well, yes, she's an engineer, because by the time you get to the 60s when I'm writing, she's very high up in aircraft design. She's talking about jet engines as Britain's moving to the jet age and so on, and gets involved in a lot of top security work as well, which leads to other plots involving spies. And in the one that's coming out later this year, she's targeted actually by Russian spies. So, and it's perfectly plausible. Campion is just now a retired country gentleman, but his wife has this very top job in the defence industry. So doing the research on that to flesh out characters and so on, that's just great fun. And a lot of other bits and pieces, but mostly there is a lot in the books themselves. And quite a bit has been written by members of the Margery Allingham Society, most of whom are far more versed in the subject matter than I am. I mean, I'm just a hack writer, but they're dedicated true fans.
Well, I love that, Mike. And I love that I instantly liked the character of Amanda when I started reading Allingham. And I love that she's kind of becoming this heroine later in the series that you're working on. And in Sweet Danger, she did save the day. She saved Campion. So we have these nice bookends there. So I think that's lovely.
Yes, she's very resourceful. And she has... when Youngman Carter wrote 2.5 Campion books after Margery's death, the basic criticism was that they weren't funny, that he'd lost the humour. And so I wanted to put that back. And as I had a reputation as comedy crime, I had to, but of a sort where I have to clean up my act quite a lot to do a different sort of humour. But I hope that worked. But the character of Amanda had got me more stick, as we would say here, than anything else I wrote about the Campions. And when the books started to appear, everybody, well, not everybody, but quite a lot of criticism was, but Amanda's so horrible. She was this beautiful 18-year-old girl in Sweet Danger, and innocent, so on, but resourceful and brave and so on. And you've turned her into this smart-ass, sharp woman who's got a vicious tongue and is a bit of a harridan and is bullying people. And I thought, well, no. You see, they've been married for 25 years. And I have been married for longer than that, and I know what happens to women. They do turn sharp, and they do turn nasty. But no, I mean, it's just... they've grown up. Somebody who is well versed in the Campion, a great champion of Margery Allingham, criticised me, wrote to me and said in one of the early ones, he didn't like the bit where Amanda and Albert were holding hands. Now, I think, give it a break. It's 1969, Just be thankful they're only holding hands. But you can't win because, the picture of Amanda was so well done, as in those early books, that, it's difficult to imagine her 20, 30 years on. But I think people have accepted my version of what she's become, because she's certainly not nasty. And she's clearly in love with Albert, as he is with her. And... and would do anything to protect. They would do anything to protect each other, as in the next book they do in spades. They really do, and it's very much the next book is Amanda is at the centre of the plot, and it's all centres around her and the trouble she's in. Still, that comes out in November, so you can look for that's Christmas presents ticked off your list already.
Yes.
So, Mike, what has surprised you about writing novels that feature a character who was developed by someone else?
The main surprise is that I got away with it for 12 books. It's odd. It's an odd feeling because I don't know, one feels terribly responsible. I mean, with my own heroes, Angel, I mean, I don't really care. Anything could happen to him. And you like him or not. He's not particularly, he was designed as a not very likeable character. very much as an anti-hero, but people actually got to love him. So I think it was because he had a cat. Even though the cat was a psychopath, and the cat was called Springsteen, and it was vicious. It attacked everybody. But I think because he looked after this cat, he found a lot of friends. But with Campion, again, he's one of the greats. I mean, there are, there's Hercule Poirot, there's Peter Wimsey, there's Albert Campion, and, Roderick Allain and Naira Marsha's hero, the four great detectives of the Golden Age, as it was. And what I've done is just tried to take a Golden Age detective and throw him into the swinging 60s. So that was a challenge, but we seem to have got away with it so far. Anyway, but it's weird because one feels responsible. I mean, there's a lot of things I can't do that I could do with my own characters, and a lot of things that you can't let them say. Apart from the fact that there are things that they might have said these days. There are things they would have said even in the 60s that are definitely no-go areas now. But with people of that age, I know, because if you read books written by 60-year-olds that were published in the 60s, the language, you have to think, wow, it's a bit dodgy. And I hate it when books have to be redacted or things taken out. Yes, I mean, they should be fit for the time. But I mean, we're not making any great political points here, I don't think, except by mistake. So we take them for what those. They're good stories, I hope. They're certainly good characters, and I can say that because I didn't invent them.
Well, speaking of that, was there anything in carrying on Campion that you felt was untouchable? You've given him some other family members, you've taken him into the 60s, but was there anything that you thought, okay, this is something I have to remain steadfast to?
I had to, by popular demand, I had to include the manservant Lug, whom Campion calls his left-hand man. And there's this, I mean, because it's irresistible. I mean, it is bizarre to think about a retired country gentleman who's 60, 69, 70 years old, having a manservant who's even older than he is. I mean, it's, unless you live in a castle, in which case you have several manservants, it's not really plausible, except unless he's accepted as part of the family. And so Lug carries the guns all the way through. Now, he can't do what he did in the early books, which is go around and beat people up and so on. But he's such a wonderful comic creation. You can't possibly waste him. And so he has to come in there. So Albert keeps him on as a foil and so on. And I think in the last book, the nephew, Christopher, says to Albert, so why do you have the fat man? So he keeps getting fatter. Why do you have that fat man hanging around? And he says, well, it's all useful. Being fat is useful, says Campion. Makes him very difficult to kidnap. And there's lots of gags like that. And, of course, very useful to have him as a link when, as in that book, and one other, I think, we do flashbacks to the 1930s, where Lug's sort of in his boisterous prime, as it were. And he's a great character too. And it's just, I mean, having a first name called such as Magus Fontaine, the trouble I've had with copy editors about, spelling Magus Fontaine and explaining it. Well, it was a battle in the Boer War. See? Oh, really? And it was even what we lost as well. So, but forget Boer War. What's that? Just put Lug, Lugg. Everybody knows. And that's the one thing I get after every book. People will write or send in reviews to Amazon and things saying, more Lug, please, in the next one. where was Lug? God. So I sometimes think I'm writing the adventures of Lug and Amanda rather than Albert Campion. Well, that's what I mean. Getting back, it's the family core. But I think if you made it too big by running on the adventures of Son of Campion, I'm not sure it would work. Not for me, anyway.
So I know there were a couple of screen adaptations of Margery Allingham's work. If there was a new adaptation, say of one of your books or even one of hers, who would you cast to play Albert Campion?
Well, there was only one film, and that was The Tiger in the Smoke, which is a brilliant book, probably her best. And they dropped the character of Albert Campion completely from it. But no one remembers that film very much, from 1956. The television series I thought was very good, very underrated, and although it's shown on one of these channels, I'm very old and I'm not used to there being channels that start with the number 11 or 12. It's far too many as far as I'm. Of course, you people in America have hundreds. But the BBC version, in which I played a small part, the character there was Campion in the 30s, so a 30-year-old Albert Campion. It was done by Peter Davison, best known probably as one of the Doctor Who's, and he'd be perfect for my Campion now because he's about 69. And I met him at a convention, and I gave him one of the books and suggested it to him. And I've forgotten entirely that, he's primarily an actor rather than a fan of Campion. So his initial reaction was, "How much?" And I said, "It's just an idea. I don't have a budget." I said, "Well, get in touch with my agent." But he would be splendid because he's exactly the right age for my aging Campion. If somebody was to do my books today, to go back to the 1930s, I don't know. I've never really thought of it because I've always thought of Davison as my Campion because he's the right age for my Campion. The big problem will be casting Lug. It's the guy in the TV series that died. Brian Glover was brilliant. I actually thought it was inspired casting.
So, Mike, is the Margery Allingham Society still active?
Yes, it's small, but they meet 3 or 4 times a year, and they always try and celebrate. Like this is the 50th anniversary of the publication of such and such a book, or they arrange visits to locations mentioned in the books as well. So yes, as a small but dedicated group of fanatics who I'm sure would pull me up if I get anything terribly wrong. But I make sure there's a map in the front of. So there's a tradition I like to keep up from some of the older books, and my cartographer, the guy who does the maps, is not only a member of the Margery Allingham Society and knows the books far better than I do, but is also a leading light in the Sherlock Holmes Society. So, I'm covered on 2 fronts there. He's got my back. I hope, anyway.
That's great. And I do love a book with a map.
So do I. I think the book in, I think, Mystery Mile is the one with the island and a little causeway called the Strood. Well, about 5 or 10 miles from here, there's an island called Mersey Island, which is connected to the mainland by a thing called the Strood. Guess where she got the idea? It does exist. But when I saw that, when I found I had a job here at the university in Colchester, I was looking around for places to live. And I got a big map out, and I saw the coastline, and there's this island with this thing. I said, that looks familiar. And I got my copy of Mr. Mile. the island in Mystery Mile. So again, I thought I must try and live there. I never managed that, but they were quite close.
Well, it seems that there just really wasn't any other author who could possibly carry on this character and this work by Allingham. And there, as you said, living in the area and having been a fan as a young man, and then having all these interesting connections, it just seems like it was meant to be.
Well, yeah, I I like to think that. That's good. It's been great fun, and I've been it's 10 years now. I've been doing it. Yeah, I must do something else. I had a before between my Angel series and the the Campions. I had a go at writing historical novels based on my time as an archaeologist, and I might try and revisit some of that. Although quite a bit of the archaeology has slipped into a couple of the Campions. There are at least two which have archaeological subplots as well. It's never boring with Albert around. It's always quite good fun because people actually do like the characters and one treads carefully. Whereas with the Angel books, I was a bit more devil may care. Don't really mind what you think. But with Albert, it has to tread carefully, well, as he would. But then again, that's because I'm scared. He was diplomatic.
Well, it's been such a treat to speak with you today, Mike. Before we go, can you share where listeners might find you on your website or social media?
Uh, I don't do much social media, I'm afraid. I write for a magazine, an e-zine, I'm supposed to call it nowadays, called Shots Mag. So it's www.shotsmag.co.uk. And I, for about 15 years, I had a regular column there. I'm now just doing odd things as the mood takes me. And I'm on Facebook as Michael Ripley. There are lots of Michael Ripleys, but see the one.
Okay. Well, we will add links to those in the show notes so listeners can track you down. So thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. It's like I said, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Yes, Mike, thank you for joining us. And thank you all for listening today to Clued in Mystery. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah, and we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website at cluedinmystery.com to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, or to join our paid membership, The Clued In Cartel. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.